if you take out my eye and in retribution, I take out your eye, now we got two blind people going on. Like, what it,
Right, exactly.
You know, like, what's the point?
There's
what's
no point.
The point? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Destiny Awaits podcast. I am Andrea.
And I am Michael.
And we are continuing our journey through the Sermon on the Mount. This week is a fun one, but before we start, I just want to ask that you can click the like button, like right now. So on this video, if you see a thumbs up, give us a thumbs up. And make sure to comment below. So let us know your name, where you're from. Just interact, not only so that we can come to get to know you better, but also because it helps get this podcast out. It helps the algorithm every time you guys engage. Also share it with other people. If you get to the end of the episode and you really enjoyed it, just share it with your friends and family. It really is a great way to support us. We don't need your financial contributions at this time. So the best way you can support us is really to just share, like, and interact with us on any of the platforms. So whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, and all of that stuff. So we're on all of them. If you happen to be watching us on YouTube and you prefer a podcast app, then head over and you can find us there. So just look for Destiny Awaits. We should be the top podcast with that name. Is there anything you would like to say before we get started? Because you're smirking.
No, I got nothing.
Okay.
I'm just trying to appear happy because normally I'm very sullen. So
You're still stuck on that. Okay.
I'm just trying to be happy here.
All right. So today is an interesting one.
Oh.
Because
Why is that?
learned something new.
Okay.
And I haven't yet explored it, talked about it. You know me, so you know, like, when I learn something new, I need to talk about it. I need to teach it so I can, in my brain, kind of put all the Lego pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
So this podcast episode
Lots of talking about it.
is going to be, yes, because you need to, like, process it in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
So this episode is basically going to be me trying to put all the Lego pieces together
Okay.
in front of an audience.
Okay.
So I apologize if this doesn't turn out as smooth, but I'm basically going to be studying as we go. Now, I did take some notes and things like that, so I'm prepared. But if you happen to see something edited and it doesn't, like, kind of jive, it's because I'm sparing you the pause of us finding Bible verses and stuff, or finding quotes.
Right.
Okay. So our passage today comes in from the Sermon on the Mount, because we've been going through that series, and it is Matthew 5:38 through 42. So I'm going to read it from the Message Bible because it's what started this entire series. And it says, "Here's another old saying that deserves a second look. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere? Here's what I propose. Don't hit back at all. If someone strikes you, stand there and take it. If someone drags you into court and sews the shirt off your back, gift wrap your best coat and make a present out of it. And if someone takes unfair advantage of you, use the occasion to practice the servant life. No more tit for tat stuff. Live generously."
Yeah, so that's about the worst. That's I get that's what the scripture is kind of saying, but when you just translate that directly into English and read it through that version, I got all kinds of problems with it.
Well, exactly. And I've had problems with this passage for a very long time. So I think that I have come to a place where, okay, I understand what Jesus was actually trying to say. There are parts of this where I'm like, okay, I can see that.
Yeah. I would say that out of everything we've read so far in the Sermon on the Mount, that's the Message version,
Yeah,
right?
That's the one you like the least.
That's about as bad as it can get.
And I'm going to explore it. So why don't you read from whatever translation you've got there?
Okay. You have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the evildoer. But whoever strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other to him as well. And if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who asks you, and do not reject the one who wants to borrow from you.
Okay. So what I'd like to do first is let's focus on the English translation. Okay. Because let's just look at it for what it is. Okay. We have the English translation to go off of, so we'll focus on that for now. Because it gives me...
Well, I have
questions. Issue with it.
I have questions
What's
for
your
you.
questions?
Well, since you said that you have some thoughts about it that you want to unpack, right? Mm-hmm. So do you have any thoughts on, you have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth?
Yeah,
what is he talking about there from what you understand?
There's a few things, and the reason I have my computer here today is because I took some notes and did some research. So 1, there are 3 passages in the Old Testament where this is referencing. So we got Exodus 21, Leviticus 24, and Deuteronomy 19. So
we're on the same page with that.
Yeah. So why don't you read, if you could, do you have it easy where you can like...
Boom, boom?
Yeah,
I can do it.
So do just one of them, Exodus 21, 23 to 25 maybe.
It's a good one.
Started at 22.
Started at 22.
Yeah.
Okay. If men fight and hit a pregnant woman and her child is born prematurely and there is no serious injury, the one who hit her will surely be punished in accordance with the woman's husband's demands of him, and he will pay what the court decides. But if there is a serious injury, then you will give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise.
Okay, so it's pretty detailed on like kind of the retribution, the payment of whatever happened, right? And it starts off with big, like, so we start off with life, and then it goes to kind of limbs, like body parts, and then it goes to injury. So this we find it's in the law. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that you've always, not always, but you've taught when it comes to cultural and historical context is there were other people groups at the time, and they had their beliefs and their laws. Yeah. And there were times where our laws were very similar to their laws, and in part because that's what people wanted, but it was just the way kind of the world functioned. So there was a law called Hammurabi's Law.
That's right.
And there was a code, so it's from ancient Mesopotamia, and they essentially in their law they had this too. Yeah. Which I'm using the word too, but really they had their law before we had our law. So their law was already in existence before it was in the Torah. And basically the code was one of the earliest known written legal systems, and it prescribed the principle of retribution. And it would punish equal to equal. So really, you're paying back what you took from someone else to equal standard. Right. It was a retributive justice where individuals receive penalties proportional to their actions. Yeah. In reality, it's not like if someone took your arm off, you were going to go now take the perpetrator's arm off. They assigned monetary value. Yes. To whatever it is that you lost.
The Code of Hammurabi did?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was a legal system, right? So if you took out someone's eye, it's not like the legal system allowed you to go now take out that person's eye.
Yeah.
They had you pay. There was monetary value assigned to whatever it is that you took from that person. So does that sound familiar?
Generally the law of Hammurabi was not always, but in most cases, significantly worse than the law too.
Right. But in this case, there was a monetary value.
Very similar.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you took out my eye and now I went and took out your eye, how does that help me? I just lost my eyesight.
Right.
How does taking your eyesight help me?
Yeah, it wouldn't.
There's no point.
Yeah, but if you paid me $1 million,
if you had to pay me because I lost my eyesight,
right,
there's a cost for that, a penalty.
Yeah.
That's how our justice system works.
Similar,
right? So that's kind of the basis for where our law came from. Now, when you look at the history of the Mesopotamian law and even our law, the reality is it was a good thing.
Actually, let's pause for a second, because if I went in today's society, went and literally plucked out your eye, I would just go to jail. You'd get nothing because I don't have much. But if we were to apply something like this, I wouldn't go to jail. Instead, I'd have to work for the rest of my life paying you a large amount of money.
Well, first, let's just go through the legal system. Criminally, yes, you would go to jail. But I could sue you civilly for my losses.
But if I'm in jail, I can't afford to pay you anything.
But I can still take you to jail,
right,
and get retribution for what you took from me. Now,
I'm just thinking about, like, maybe I am a dangerous society at that point, so I should go to jail if I'm capable of plucking someone's eye out. So I get that, right? So maybe that's it. But I just find it interesting that that's not the direction they took with it.
No, it's not. And what I'd say is our justice system in the U.S., so I'm not even going to use the word Western society because I don't know how other societies work. I know how the U.S. works. Our justice system is not restorative in any form or fashion.
No.
We punish.
Yeah, we punish.
Right? So if you pluck out my eye, you are taken to jail. You're going to have to go to trial. And
which would limit my ability to even give you something of value.
Exactly. Because the legal system doesn't care about hold on. I'm not going to say the legal system does not care about the victim, but the victim is not what the prosecutor is seeking justice for. Justice is to penalize you for hurting me, not for giving me back what I lost.
Right.
It's not about vindicating the victim, giving them justice, making them whole. It's about punishing. It's not even about the perpetrator paying back to the victim.
Right.
It's about our justice system getting a win.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yes. And today we're recording, and it happens to be Martin Luther King Jr. Day, where we honor him. And I'm going to quote something from his book, and we're going to talk about that because there's something during the civil rights movement that he said that is so beautiful. Actually, I'm going to say it right now because it's just so fitting. Let me just find where it is in my notes. Oh, here. Okay, so in King's book, Why We Can't Wait, during the civil rights movement in Birmingham, he had a non-violent movement, okay? And there were everyone who was there protesting had to sign something. Essentially, they called it the 10 Commandments. They had to sign these 10 Commandments, and they had to basically say that they were going to be not violent. They were not going to be violent. But what I want to focus on here is the second commandment that he had, which is, remember always that the nonviolent movement in Birmingham seeks justice and reconciliation, not victory. And that was so powerful to me because sometimes we celebrate things that is so based on revenge and punishment, but really doesn't change anything.
Yeah, because like, okay, I know this is kind of crazy and extreme, but if I plucked out your eye, there's two different routes you could potentially take if you were in control of the process, which you wouldn't be. But if you were, one process would be, I owe you now. I owe you lots because you've lost your eye.
Right.
The second one was, I plucked out your eye, therefore you want to hurt me as bad as possible because I hurt you.
Right. That's revenge.
That's revenge. And in our justice system focuses on revenge more than retribution.
Yes, especially in the court of public opinion. Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where we look at this eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and it seems kind of barbaric, right? Like, who's going to go out and pluck someone's eye, or,
right.
We're
just using it as an example.
It's an example, but at the time, the reason this law was put in place was so that there could be justice done, but it wouldn't be taken too far. It almost puts a ceiling.
Yeah, it had to be proportionate to the crime, not
Right.
exceeding it.
Right. So revenge and vengeance, many times when we think about it, is like, okay, you did this to me, now you're going to have to pay me back and more.
So in context, though, in Second Temple Judaism, they said at the time of Jesus that it had become a cultural norm for personal retaliation instead of appropriate response.
Right.
So this had become not a rule that will keep society in check and make sure that if you take from someone, you have to pay it back. It became a revenge,
Right.
a method that was used. And Jesus decided to address it.
Well, and think about it, personally speaking, and I'll speak for myself, when someone does something against me, a lot of times, like, if I were to go just off of my urge, like what I want is I want that person to suffer for what they did to me, and to any capacity, right? So then it made me think, like, do I want them to just give me back what they took, or do I want them to suffer?
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm hearing here. Like, are you just trying to get retribution? Or are you trying to punish someone? Are you trying to make someone suffer far beyond what they even took from you?
Like, for example,
It's
if
like
you stole from someone under the law of Hammurabi, if you stole, I think the punishment was death or something extreme, like cutting off a hand. Like, you would literally lose your hand. If you stole from someone, you would lose your hand. But under the law, if you stole from someone, you only had to pay it back 4 times. Okay. So if you sold, in today's world, if you sold $500, you'd have to pay back $2,000. Mm-hmm. So if you stole 1 cow, you'd have to pay back 4 cows.
Right.
Right. So you didn't lose your hand, though. Right. So that's where even the law of Hammurabi became a revenge thing. And the law was more about, hey, we need to pay it back 4 times. You now owe them.
Right.
You've taken from them, and you now owe them.
Right.
And now moving forward all the way into Western times, we're back to revenge again. Most of the time, we kind of go back and forth, right?
Yeah, it's almost like, especially in America, where like our revenge isn't necessarily violent and physical. We don't go in like, I mean, some people do get physically violent, but for the most part, we seek to hurt people with words, with actions, destroying their reputation, going around and, trying to make them fail or cause them or lose something, like it's just a more, in my mind, sometimes more vicious than actually punching someone in the face. And we're going to talk about that in the context that we have here. I do want to talk about justice and what justice really is. But before we do that, I want to kind of keep going here. When I look at this in English, right, it says, but I say, going into verse 19, but I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. When I read that, like, I'm just looking at it, face value, literal translation, I hear, be a doormat. Let people step all over you. Don't even fight. If someone goes and hits you, don't defend yourself. Just let them destroy you.
Yeah, in the Western world, that is one way to look at it.
And there's people think, like, there's people go as far as saying we shouldn't have police, we shouldn't have armies, we shouldn't have, like, it should be absolutely no fighting back whatsoever. If someone's going to do evil to you,
let them do evil.
Let them do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I look at the life of Jesus, I don't see Jesus being a doormat ever. And someone may say, well, he let them arrest him and he let them whip him and put him on a cross and kill him. Listen.
When the time was right.
Jesus didn't let them out of, like, based on this verse, he did it because he had to do it for us.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't allowing them to shame him for the sake of shaming. There was a purpose. He was a living sacrifice. He sacrificed his life for many different reasons, which we're not going to get there. There was a willingness. He wasn't a victim to their aggression. He voluntarily put himself.
He became the sacrificial
there.
lamb, which instituted the new covenant, and he had to die in order to do so.
And how many times before that day or before that time did he say, my time has not come? And he would, like, run away, or he would hide away, or say, don't tell anyone what I'm doing. There were times where he called, the religious leaders vipers and serpents and all this stuff, right? Like, he stood up for himself.
Yeah, and they couldn't do anything to him until he was ready to let them.
Right, because he let.
Yeah.
Okay, so, wow, that just clicked on something that I learned. So when I look at that, I'm like, okay, what is justice? Because when I'm reading this, it also talks about, if someone takes you to court and they take your shirt, give them your cloak too, and there's some context behind that. But when I look at those, okay, what is justice? What is God's view of justice? And this is something that's in my book, In His Image. I have it in the journey, and it's even covered in the 31-day devotional I have called In Her Image, where we talk about justice. And there's a quote from this book, God Loves Justice, by Jessica Nicholas. And I'm just going to read it because I don't even want to summarize it because she does such a magnificent job. And when I read this, it changed so much inside of me, because I always had this view of God, like in terms of a judge, like he's on the throne. I think of American court. You have the judge behind the table with the gavel, right, and he's just waiting to tell you how wrong you are and what your punishment's going to be for what you did wrong.
Yep.
Right? So here it says, Western views of justice are primarily focused on how things should be done, laws, rules, and what should happen when laws are broken. In Hebrew thought, justice is focused on what life should be like. Justice in the Hebrew world was concerned not just with laws, but with enhancing all human life, especially the social world. That meant justice applied to all relationships. And then she lists a few examples. The Hebrew word that sums up what life is like is shalom. That word usually shows up as peace in our Bibles, but the meaning in Hebrew is more than simply lack of conflict,
yep,
which is what we usually use the word colloquially peace for.
Mm-hmm.
Shalom comes from a root word that means to be complete or to be sound. Shalom is peace that comes from everything being complete and whole. And then I'm going to skip forward. The purpose of justice in Hebrew society was to restore and sustain shalom. Okay, so shalom was taken away, wholeness was taken away, and the purpose of justice is to restore that. And doing justice meant not only not doing wrong, but also actively doing right and restoring what is broken. Justice, I'm skipping again, justice was done by everyone and was everyone's responsibility. Because of that, justice was taught and not merely enforced. People took ownership of the shalom and wholeness in their community and if something was wrong. God intended the entire culture of Israel to learn and teach how to do justice in a way that shaped their hearts as well as their behavior. That was God's heart. We see them veering off and focusing on the laws as we've been talking about. But what really stood out to me here and what I realized is justice is about restoration. Mm-hmm. Something was lost. Something was broken. We're going to put it back. It's about making things right? We talked about justiceness a few episodes ago. Doing what is right. So when I look at the English translation of this passage,
right,
I get slapped and I'm going to turn my head and let you slap my other side. Where is the justice?
Yeah, in the English world, it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. So I've always been confused about this, and I learned something from the Bible Project. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give them credit because I learned it from them. I'm not saying this is what it says. I'm saying this is something new that I learned that to me is like, well, that makes a lot of sense.
Wow.
Okay?
I'm very excited to hear this because I wonder if what they are teaching is the same as what I'm thinking. So
okay,
I'm very excited. We haven't talked about this. So
yes, I know. And I've been like holding back so much.
I have not seen the Bible Project on this
and
part.
It's been hard for me because I wanted to prepare for the episode and I was like, man, I can't even like talk to someone to like
yeah.
So
ahead. What do you got?
Okay, so we're looking at it from the English translation.
As you talk, I'm going to review my notes, see if I'm on the same page.
Okay, but
I'm just kidding.
A lot of times, well, for me, I want to know what Jesus was saying, mm-hmm. what his intention was, what the audience was understanding through the whole thing.
Okay, so specifically, what are you thinking about when he says, whosoever strikes you on the right cheek?
Well, I want to go before that.
Okay, and before you move on from there, you just talked about peace and shalom.
Yep.
Okay. Isn't that interesting that if you go back to, before we move off of that, if you go back to blessed are the peacemakers, 5:9, for they shall be called the children of God. So in context, it's not peacemakers, it's blessed are the shalom makers.
Yes.
For
Justice.
They shall be called the children of God. It's an action. Remember how we talked about it's an action
right.
that you have to take, yet we never brought up shalom and how shalom is an action that you have to take. It's a negotiation to bring shalom.
Well, you want to know why?
Like we totally missed that.
That's because in that episode, for me anyway, I was focused on what I had learned about peacemaking and that we can't just avoid conflict. So I was looking at it from the conflict standpoint.
Right, but we were on the right track, but we just didn't use that word shalom.
Exactly.
Which we should have.
To bring more
And then
fullness.
The next verse, blessed are you when people shall insult you, persecute you, say all kinds of evil things about you falsely. Right? See how that correlation goes back to 38?
That's great. See, okay, so we have to make a note of that connection because as we go through the Sermon on the Mount, we just saw that connection.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's going to be another connection.
Yeah.
The order. So now.
Well, I wonder if this is a chiasm too.
That's what I'm saying. Is there a connection between the 9 Beatitudes and what we're going through now? Oh, now I'm going to have to go back and look.
Well, so the middle of the chiasm would be 21, right? You have heard it was said, older generation do not murder. So
no, it would
go back and look at that.
It would be the salt and light.
Mm-hmm.
Or the thing
be.
About the laws. So I have to look at that. This book was written in Greek, not
book?
Matthew.
Yes, it was.
Not in English.
That's
Matthew
right.
didn't speak English.
No, it was
okay.
Originally written in Greek. Now, there's some argument for Aramaic,
and it was translated
Hebrew,
to English. Okay. And there are some words that's very difficult to translate word for word because there's either not a word in English or the thought is a lot more complex. Like they have one word that has like kind of a complex meaning to it. So there's this preposition. So it says, an eye for and I. Preposition for. There's the Greek word for is anti. Anti in this case, so we know anti if you know the Latin, anti is against.
Right.
But the Greek definition for anti, if we were going to use like a thesaurus and words, it would be substitution, equivalent, or exchange.
Sure.
So that makes sense.
Exchange for an I.
An I in exchange for an I. It's an equal part, right? You're comparing it. It's equivalent. Then it says, what's the next part where it says to do not resist evil? Read that for me.
But I say to you, do not resist evil.
Okay.
Or, I'm sorry, but I say to you, do not resist the evildoer.
Okay.
Big difference.
Right. Now, if I read, and I didn't focus on this because it wasn't the purpose of my study, I don't think the original has the person. I think it does say evil. It doesn't say person, but I think because of context, they added it.
Yeah, they said that they couldn't. According to the NET translators, they were not willing to do it.
Okay, tell me why, because I just came up with the reason why.
Well, they said they weren't willing to do it because then it would be translated simply evil.
Which means do not resist evil, and there's other parts in the Bible that tell you to resist evil. So there's a conflict.
They couldn't say
that. Okay, guys. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is why we need all translations. You need to understand context. So because the original didn't match with what they believe, they just went ahead and changed it.
That's right.
Okay.
Because they saw conflict.
Okay, they saw conflict.
But
they chose to resolve it the way they wanted to resolve it.
Yeah.
Okay. The Greek word for to resist, for the phrase to resist, is, and I want to make sure I pronounce this right, anti-stenai. Okay, so anti, A-N-T-I, stenai, S-T-E-N-A-I. That's the Greek term. So we just talked about for.
Right.
And now we see anti-stenai. And in English, it's translated to resist. That is...
What does stenai mean?
It means to stand firm or to stop.
Okay.
Okay? So to anti-stenai is kind of like, imagine you're staring at a wall, you're standing up against it, you're in opposition to it. Mm-hmm. Okay? So when you read it in English and you're using that definition, it says, do not resist. So do not stand against, do not stand firm against evil or evildoer. So that works, right? No argument there. But a lot of scholars believe that word anti-stenai Jesus was using as a pun. And what he was saying is, in terms of, remember the anti part where it's matching, you're matching it. So what he's saying is, and again, I'm processing this for the first time saying it out loud. He's saying, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye. I'm saying, don't match the standing against to the same degree, like in the same way. I had written it here, so I would say that, like, don't stand in the same kind. Don't treat them, don't stand in a way that's going to match what they've done to you.
Yeah, so what I have in my notes here is break the cycle of revenge.
Yes.
We need to end that cycle of revenge, and we need to. It's not about allowing the system a systematic injustice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Where you would just be a doormat and just roll over you. But about personal conduct and breaking the cycle of revenge. Meaning, like, if you hurt someone and then they hurt someone and then they're hurt, then they go and hurt hurt people. That's the cycle of revenge we're trying to break.
Right.
Because if we go the opposite, it exposes their egregious error and causes them to feel shame and change.
Right. So basically, don't stand, but not in kind. Don't do it the way they're doing it.
Right.
Right. So, and I'm going to expand on that, but Paul And there's a few verses. I made some notes here. So Paul in Romans 12:17, in 1 Thessalonians 5:15, and Peter in 1 Peter 3:9 says, don't repay evil for evil.
Right.
And when you look at it, it's almost like instead of Paul using anti-steni, it's anti, not anti, anti-steni, he used the word repay.
Yeah, so Jesus essentially saying the same thing Paul is saying.
Well, Paul almost like clarifies it.
Yeah.
Right? So don't pay in kind. Don't repay evil for evil, because that's not going to fix anything.
Yeah.
You're just going to make things worse. Gandhi said when it came to an eye for an eye, he's like, I'm not going to quote, I'm just going to paraphrase my understanding, is kind of like, if we lived in a world of eye for an eye, then everybody would be blind. What do you get?
Yeah, this was not about accepting abuse. It was about challenging the oppressor in a non-violent way, coming up with another way. You're still going to challenge,
right?
But you're going to do it in a way that draws shame. So in context, to turn the other cheek. I guess we'll wait till we get to that point, but we'll talk about that. There's some things there with that too. So.
Right. So when you look at, you're looking at that, right? You see it in English, says don't resist evil, and it seems very passive. Like you're just going to stand there and let somebody keep punching your face, right? Like that's the way we think about it. And I hate to bring this up, but it's just something that's so relevant in my life and something that I'm very passionate about getting justice for. But when it comes to, like, let's say women in abusive relationships, you know, people have quoted this passage to them and say, hey, you can't you can't resist. Don't resist it.
No, not just people, pastors of churches and people that have supposedly spiritual fathers and leaders in the Christian movement who have no understanding of the Bible, but think they do.
Right.
And they've been telling women for years and years that have been being abused by their husbands, that reading them these verses and saying, you need to just take it.
Just take it.
Be like Jesus.
Turn the other cheek.
When someone lies about you and someone beats you and someone does this, does that, you're just supposed to be like Jesus. And it's not what they were saying at all.
I know. And it's something that's really destroyed so many people and their lives and put them in very dangerous situations. And so it's something that I've never
tried to live this many times, and
it's
very
hard.
Fun.
But when we look at the examples, let's say, the examples that we're going to see coming up, there's a response that's happening. So it's not like the person's just standing there and doing nothing. There's actually an action, whether it's turning the face or giving the tunic. But there's cultural significance to these examples that audience would have understood.
Proper context, yeah.
So I think that the best thing to do to really clarify the whole pun thing and really put some weight behind why scholars say that. Like, it's a play on word.
Okay.
I can't see, this is what happens when I just learned something. And anti-steni, right? The word anti is used in eye for an eye.
Right.
Tooth for a tooth. And he's using that word as a pun when he's saying anti-steni, meaning don't not resist. He's saying stand, but not in the same posture as eye for an eye. Don't pay them back, because the anti is in there.
Yeah,
it's like a pun. So let's break down the examples and the cultural perspective. So the first one is, if someone slaps you on your right cheek, give them your left. So what do you know about the context of that?
So the way I've always seen it is, so if you slap someone on the right cheek, which would back then typically be done with the back of the hand.
Why? Well, because you're doing it with your dominant hand. So, right? So, like, this is my right hand.
Yeah.
That's your right cheek.
Right.
So if I'm going to
I'm
slap
left-handed,
your,
so I would have done it that way, but other people would do it that way.
I know, but the culture was right-handed.
Right.
So I'm going to, in order to slap your right cheek,
Yeah.
I'd have to use the back of my hand. So just for visual purposes.
Well, not only would you have to, but that's how they did it.
That's how they did it. Why did they do it?
That
What
was
do you know?
just the context.
Well,
In context, that's the way it was back then. They would slap the right cheek, and it was typically done with the back of the hand, and it was because it was an insult.
it was an insult. It brought shame.
It brought shame, yeah.
It was really saying, you are beneath me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here to embarrass you.
Which is we don't really, although we do have slapping technically in our culture, it's frowned upon, but it exists. It is not the same as it was back then. When you slap someone with the back of the hand on the right cheek in the Jewish culture, you were shaming them and insulting them.
Right.
Okay?
It was like a huge offense.
A huge offense.
Yep.
But then if you turn, it says if you turn the left cheek, so then let's think about that.
Now it's open hand.
So now it's open hand, and that would have forced the assailant to use the open hand or the other hand, altering the dynamics of the interaction, the action, making them reconsider their action. It was a challenge.
Do you want to know why?
Why?
Because, so first of all, even today, when you think of someone slapping another person, it's degrading.
Right.
It's worse from a shame perspective. It's worse than punching. Being slapped in the face is humiliating versus being punched, because punching is aggressive.
Right.
Slapping is like, it's internal almost. Like, you're not looking to destroy the person, to hurt the person. You're looking to shame the person. Okay?
And there is no shame if you turn your face the other way and go, come on,
Well,
let's go.
what's happening is, while slapping, backhand slap in that culture was to people lesser than you, right? Was shame, be quiet, who are you? You're nothing. But an open hand slap was done between equals. It was almost like a punch, like come at me. It's almost like a come at me, you and me are equals, let's go at it.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit more respect there.
Yeah.
So when you turn your cheek, it's exactly what you're saying.
I'm on the same level as you.
You're causing the person to think, and you're telling them, okay, now look at me again. Why are you putting me beneath you? Who are you?
Right.
We're equals, so let's go at it.
And that's why it's important to look at context, because in today's culture, even what we're explaining is not relevant. Because if you give the other cheek, they're just going to punch you in the other cheek, and then they'll start windmilling you and pulling hair, if you ever see the fight videos.
But that's because that culture, unfortunately, it's not like that today, was a culture of honor.
That's right.
There was a culture
Everything
of
was
honor.
significant.
Yes, everything mattered. Today, like, human life is not
But those people
respected.
sitting there listening to what Jesus was talking about there, that this would have meant something to them.
Yes, they would have totally understood what Jesus was saying.
Yeah.
So now it's kind of like, okay, someone backhand slaps you, they're shaming you, they're trying to put you in your place, they're putting you down.
So,
and you're a victim, right?
Yeah.
When you turn your head,
isn't that taking a place of ultimate authority right there?
Yes, you are showing them, I am not a victim. I'm going to turn and put myself in the same place as you. And on the Bible Project, so I'm going to put a link to the Bible Project episode, because
did they see it the same way as what I just explained, or similar?
Well, yes, but they have, he's a scholar, so he just puts it in a very eloquent way, which is why I recommend everybody go listen to, because I just learned this, so I'm trying to put words to it. But Michelle gave a quote, and I loved it so much, and it's from James Baldwin, and it says, if I'm not who you say I am. So think about being backhand slapped in the face, being told that, you should be ashamed, putting you down. If I'm not who you say I am, then you're not who you think you are. Because turning the cheek is saying, you're trying to define who you are by who you think I am. And I'm going to turn my cheek and say, are you really who you think you are? Because you don't know who I am. You've got it wrong about me.
And it's also about breaking the cycle of abuse too, because it's causing them to think and say, I need to be different.
Right.
I need to handle things different.
Yep.
And you're not just striking back, therefore not looking at them going,
you're not responding in kind.
Yes, because if someone smacks me on the cheek with the back of their hand saying you're nothing, and I turn around and do the same thing to them, I'm perpetuating a cycle of abuse.
Yes.
And it is just hurt people.
And what does it get you?
And we're just going to keep going.
Yep. It gets you nowhere.
But if I challenge in the right way by offering the other cheek, in today's world, I don't even know what that looks like, but we can try to figure it out, right? But what it doesn't mean is that we're doormats and we just let people do whatever they want to us.
Exactly.
We stand up for ourselves. We point out the truth. We stand up for the truth.
We're just not going to do it in kind, and we're going to get, like the Bible Project puts it in a way of like, we need to get creative with how we respond and how we stand.
Many, many times where I wish I would have known this better. I know it now.
Tell me about
it. Because I would have handled so many situations. There's times people have lied through their teeth about me. And I've always had this attitude where if someone lies about me or besmirches me or comes after me in any way, I just ignore them. Just
me too.
Nothing to do with them. I have nothing to do with them. But that wasn't even the right way to handle it.
Right.
The right way to handle it was to somehow, in a way, stand up for myself and speak the truth.
In a way that reflects God.
In a way that was, that is good. And even if they don't agree, even if they don't back down.
Even if it doesn't feel good for them,
Yeah, I never should have backed down. I never should have turned away from the situation. And many times in my life, even up till a few years ago, I would turn away from those situations. And if I knew what I knew now, I would have been much more vocal.
But why? Because you and I, because I've done it too, we were trying to keep the peace.
Yeah.
We weren't making peace.
We weren't creating shalom.
These are all things that when I'm learning, I'm thinking back of like, oh, how should I have handled it? I didn't handle it right. Not that I handled it wrong, but I could have been better. And what I see here in this passage, really like at the core, is wisdom.
Yeah, because to keep peace, I said this in one of the first episodes, to keep peace takes massive strength. Massive courage.
You mean to make peace?
To make peace. To make, in proper context, make shalom.
Right.
Takes massive courage.
Absolutely.
Takes massive strength.
And you have to stand up for what's good. And the Bible talks about standing up for good, which is why they didn't like the translation. And they changed it, for, in the way they translated it, because it doesn't match the Bible. And that's the conflict I had. So these examples that we're seeing and that we're going to walk through are very specific examples. I don't think that it applies. It's not like you can apply the slapping thing to being punched in the face, in my opinion, because slapping was, again, not aggressive. It was demeaning.
It was an insult.
Right? It was demeaning.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're going to apply this literally, but there's a principle. So let's walk through each example and kind of identify what the principle is so it helps us apply it to our lives. So the next one is...
the coat.
Yes, suing. So it brings a legal matter in. So what do you have on this one?
So if someone takes you to court for your tunic, right, which I don't know if you know this, but the tunic is the undergarment.
Yeah.
Okay?
So for context for the audience, let's share what these things are.
That's
in
what
that
I'm about
time.
to do.
So we have to, what we all need to do all the time when we're reading the Bible is put yourself in that culture at that time. They did not wear pants. Their shirts did not look like ours. Their coats did not look like ours. And we have a closet full of them. So giving one away isn't that big of a deal.
Right.
But back then it was different. So paint the picture for us.
So if you sued them in court and you took their tunic, so now we're not even talking about overcoat at this point. We're already to undergarment.
Right.
So assume someone has only their undergarment on, and if you sue them, you give them their undergarment, right? And then Jesus says, give them your cloak too. Well, the cloak would be the last stitch of clothing that you have over your private parts.
Right.
Like for a man, it would be the part that covers their genitals, right? So we're talking about Jesus is saying, give them that too. Now, what's
which leaves a person what?
Naked,
Yes.
right? So he's saying, and it would shame their litigant, right? It would shame what they were trying to accomplish for their greed. And in both Roman and Jewish culture, that would have made a big effect.
Right.
So
the outer garment, the cloak, was the more expensive article of clothing. And that's usually what people would go after you for. So if you owed somebody something and they went to go sue you to get it back, they would want your cloak because that's usually the more expensive. It's what protects you from the elements.
You're saying that the cloak
is worth more than the undergarment. It was thicker. It was wool.
So you're saying because that's the opposite of what I just said. So
no, it's not.
You're saying the tunic, because the tunic is the undergarment.
Let me finish my thought so you can see how it doesn't oppose what you just said. Okay. So the outer garment is what protects a person. It's what keeps them warm. It's what protects them from the elements. And in some cases, it was people's blanket in cold weather. In Galilee, for example, during the summer months, yes, it was warm. But the rest of the year, it was cold. And even in the spring, they needed it.
You're correct. I'm wrong.
They needed it at nighttime. So there is a law, and I don't know where it is, but I'll find it and put it in the show notes, but it's in the Bible, where if you sue someone for their cloak, like they owe you something and you're going to take their cloak as a promise of payment, you need to give their cloak back every night.
Yeah.
There's a law for that. Why? Because it gets so cold at night. It's their only blanket. It's too, like when you're looking, again, think about God's justice. You can take it, but you have to give it back every night. So when someone sues your undergarments, first of all, the tunic is the undergarment. Then.
Yes,
the tunic is the undergarment.
I misspoke earlier.
The tunic is, you did say that the tunic is the underwear.
I did? Okay. Yeah.
So think about, like, if you watch The Chosen, I have their shirt on today, but if you watch The Chosen, you see, like, Jesus had what looks like a dress and there's the belt over it. That's the tunic. That's essentially covering all the private parts, right?
Right.
It's usually thinner. It's not like as expensive as the cloak that covers them in the cold and protects them from the elements.
Yeah.
So if you have a cloak and someone decides to take your tunic, your shirt, your undershirt, your underwear, that's almost like saying it's someone's trying to take advantage of you. Because why would they want your tunic, your underwear, instead of your coat? Your coat is what's worth more. So they're trying to hurt you.
If you were to actually shame someone like that, you're really...
But this is the thing. They're not shaming in a public way. They're shaming it to get at you, but people don't know because you have your coat over. You'd have your coat over it.
Yeah.
So, but it's almost like a subtle torture, right? Like they're ruining your life, but no one can tell. But if you say, oh, no, take my cloak too, it's almost like you're making a scene. Now you're, like you said, now you're naked.
Yeah.
Like they're going to take the shirt off your back. That's the only thing you had during that time. Most people just had one article of clothing.
Yeah.
Right? And they would wash that. And if you were rich, you had more. But in the context, the premise was you had one. So if someone takes your shirt, usually you can cover up with your cloak. And they kind of abuse you. And what's the word I'm looking for? Like when someone frivolously takes you to court, they're just trying to torture you.
It's litigant.
Which I know exactly what that's like. And Jesus is saying, no, give them their cloak. It's not about you standing there naked and being ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
It's about you almost like making a scene and saying, look at this injustice. Look, he's taking everything from me. let it be known by all. Because if he just takes your shirt, nobody knows what's going on.
So isn't a part of this also, if that's the case, which I believe it is as well, like what the Bible Project is saying, I agree with that based on my notes. But if that's the case, then part of this is the exposure.
Yes.
Where you're letting everyone know. This
You're
guy
exposing
stripped
the
me
injustice.
naked. Now he's slapping me with the front of his hand. Like this, you're exposing it.
Yep.
So in today's world, when someone treats you this way, do you expose them?
Well, this
is that part of standing up for yourself?
So in our
Maybe.
case, aka my case, it's something that up until recent months, I had been keeping my personal life in that context private.
Right.
I hadn't shared it. Most people in my life had, and probably may still have if they don't listen to all my videos, have no clue that I have been taken to court over and over and over again for the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to focus on particularly the last 4.5, right? Because I've been to court. So I've been to court really in and out over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But over the last 5, I've been a victim of abuse being perpetrated by our legal system. And I don't blame the courts and law enforcement. It's just the way the laws are written, right? You have an evil person taking advantage of the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
And I had kept it quiet for a long time.
The one that backhand slapped you plus, because
Right.
he did a whole lot more than that,
Right.
is the same one that's coming after you.
Right.
And trying to hurt you.
Yes. Literally
Which
did
is
the first
crazy.
thing. Now doing the second thing. And by me keeping it quiet, it was me walking around with my cloak
Mm-hmm.
and just hiding it, like as if I had something to be ashamed about, right? And what that was accomplishing was it was allowing him to perpetuate what he was doing, and the danger kept increasing, right? Until I finally got the chutzpah to finally make it public and let it be known. And I didn't necessarily share the whole legal side and what's been going on, but I shared the violence that was being done against us perpetually. And, and this is what I'm reading this and I'm learning about this and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what does this mean for me? I don't know that it means that I'm supposed to tell everybody what's going on. I still don't think there's a lot of wisdom in that at this point, but it's just about making people aware. Look at the injustice being done. He's trying to take everything from me. And it's not only it's really not even about me. It's about my daughters. And they are the vulnerable ones in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you want to take my shirt off my back, that's fine. It's not fine, but I am not going to let you do that to my daughters.
Yeah, and that's why understanding this in proper context is important, because you've opened up about it, you've talked about it, you're standing up to it, and it is the right thing to do, because that's what love dictates, that you do that.
But I hadn't stood up.
You must protect your daughters.
I hadn't stood up for a long time, and when I say that is, I've always had the truth on my side. I've always rested in that. I've always rested in the fact that God knows the truth. He's on my side, and I know that the truth will prevail. But I've always been more on the defensive. I've always let him slap me, and then I just walk away. I didn't turn my cheek. I walked away. And then the next time, and again, there was abuse, but I'm not talking about physically. I'm now using it metaphorically.
Yep.
Then he'd come back and he'd do it again.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe in a bit stronger way.
Yeah.
And then I'd walk away again. And I never confronted it. I never tried to make peace. I never tried to I never partnered with God to bring justice. I just kind of walked away every time. And I thought that's what God would have wanted. Like, I sincerely thought that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And now that we're going through the Sermon on the Mount, I'm starting to realize that wasn't the wisest thing to do. It's not that it was wrong. It just wasn't the wisest.
What you understood. So now let's talk about the mile.
Yes. So tell us about this mile.
Well, I want to know what you know about the mile first.
Well, I have to say that I didn't know about this the way that it worked. I don't know if it's a law or whatever the case is. It was a Roman law, but The Chosen portrayed this so incredibly well. And I know you haven't watched it yet.
No, but I can tell you that it's not a law, but it was a rule that Rome came up with.
Okay. For soldiers.
For soldiers, yeah. So a Roman soldier could. I'm going to ask. Way I saw it was the Roman soldiers could legally force civilians to carry their gear for 1 mile, but no more. So there was a limit to it. Going an extra mile would be an act of either unexpected kindness, potentially shaming the soldier, or at least making them reflect on their actions.
Right.
Is that what you were thinking?
That is. And I obviously, the Bible Project brought that up, but I had learned that on The Chosen in the last
I haven't seen that.
What do you call it? The last season.
Yeah.
They have the soldiers walking, and Jesus is with his disciples. And sorry, spoiler alert, but it was just like they portrayed it. So like now that I know, I'm like, oh wow, they portrayed that so well. So he's walking with his disciples, and the soldiers come and make them all carry their equipment, their swords and everything, even the women. And it was all heavy, obviously very heavy. So there was a cap. So just like eye for an eye is a cap on what you can do, this was the cap. It was we say 1 mile, but it was whatever one of theirs was, right?
Sure.
So they in the Chosen, they had reached the mile, and then they're like, okay, you can give us the stuff back, because they were about to get into town. And Jesus goes, oh no, it's okay. We can carry it all the way into town. And Jesus knew that they weren't allowed to, right? So they're like, no, we can't let you do that. We have to take it. And Jesus like, no, you guys have to carry this stuff all the time. We'll do it for you. We will carry it for you. And and everyone's looking at Jesus, like all his disciples are like, what is wrong with you, Jesus? And they're walking, and the soldiers are walking, and you could see their discomfort. It made them so uncomfortable that they were doing this.
I've got to watch that. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, and then they get to like before they even get into town, and all the soldiers are like, no, like it's almost like it flipped the reaction. No, let us take that from you. You shouldn't have to do this. And it was all this stuff. And Jesus turns to, I don't know if it was Peter or somebody, and he goes, he said something, I have to watch it again, but he said something like, this is what that means. Like, look what it did to them. It made them think about what they were doing to us. We didn't punish them for it. We just showed them what generosity looked like.
Yeah.
And it was such a power move, like the way The Chosen portrayed it was such a power move. So when I was listening to the Bible Project go through this and teach on it, and they do such a good job at building it, that scene was coming into my head, and I go, it's a power move. The same thing with the slapping, the same thing with the giving the coat. The person is coming at you and they're victimizing you. You're a victim, right? And they're wanting you to feel less than. They're wanting to make you feel smaller than them. They're trying to tell you who you are. But when you stand against them, not in kind, not like they did, but you're forcing them to see you for who you really are, right? It's a power move. You're saying, no, if you're going to do that to me, if you're going to shame me, then you're going to look at me from the perspective of who I really am, not who you think I am.
That's right.
And it forces them to stop, and it challenges them. I've always said A bully is a bully because we let them be bullies. But when you stand up to them, when you show them, no, I'm your equal, it causes them to pause and to reflect and to think about, is this really what I want to do?
Yeah. It's an ethical revolution, I guess you could say. So first, Jesus introduces an ethic that goes beyond legalism, right, to love and nonviolent resistance, which was radical. That's crazy. No one did that back then. But it's a call for action, okay, that will challenge the oppressor, exactly what you're saying. Change your ways, or at least, at a minimum, recognize human dignity.
Yes.
And see that the oppressed has value, right? And I think
justice.
So it's not, and the second thing is it's not passivity, right? Where you just kind of let people roll over you and do what we've done in the past, right? It's about, these teachings are often put as a advocate for passivity. When in the evangelical world, the pastors go out and when they teach this, they teach it that way.
Right.
It's who Jesus was. Let's be like Jesus. What would Jesus do? WWJD, right? But instead, it's an action. It's to promote active, transformative engagement.
Right.
Right. It's and it's done through love. It's done through generosity, right? And it's done through action, and it's a non-violent action.
Correct, yeah.
And it also requires wisdom. It requires being able to think outside the box.
Be creative.
Having the right heart and the right avenue. Shalom, bringing shalom to the world, again, takes massive strength, takes a lot of courage, right? We just had the election today, or not the election, but the inauguration. And when I look at, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, right? Nobody can deny that the guy who won went through absolute hell to get there.
Yes.
Okay. And it
defied all odds,
right? And eye for an eye was not his response.
No.
Because, for obvious reasons, he didn't do that. He didn't respond in like kind. But it took a massive amount of strength, went through a long period of time where he was the loser, he was the odd man out, he was out like no good, he was a criminal, he was this, he was that. I mean, he didn't just roll over. He stood up. He spoke for the truth. He exposed the lies.
Right.
And look what happened. People agreed with him. And they were like, oh, yeah, this is the problem.
Yep.
But if he would have done what so many people in his position would have done in the past, and they would have said, hey, it's not worth it. I don't want this fight.
Right.
I don't want to fight. I don't want to stand up. It's not worth it. I just want to run away.
Think about all the pardons that were just given by now the previous administration.
Yeah.
Does that not show that they're expecting an eye for an eye?
Oh, yeah, because
they're expecting that what they've been doing is going to be done to them.
Yeah.
That's what they keep saying.
Yeah.
And I just hope that people have the ears to hear what they are saying.
Well, it also points out that they're guilty.
Well,
every pardon given points out that they were guilty.
I said, because there were no charges, there's in some cases like nothing's been investigated, nothing's happened, right?
Yeah.
So this morning when I saw it, my first thought was, tell me you're guilty without telling me you're guilty.
Right.
Like, let's pardon people who have done nothing wrong, in quotations, if you're listening to this.
But think about, here's a guy who, and technically is a felon now, right? They made sure of that. He's technically a felon. He's been charged with hundreds of crimes now. He's been in multiple courtrooms, accused of everything you can imagine, from lying to insurrection to trying to overturn elections, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Right. All projection, by the way.
Yeah. And he's been charged with all this stuff. He's been made to look like the absolute worst person on earth. They've lied about him in every way, right? But he didn't back down. He didn't. Well, was he not living this? Well, look, I don't care what you say about him being a Christian, not a Christian, whatever. The point is that I think it's a good example of Shalom. Like, he knew what he was going through, but he stood up to it, and he fought back, but he fought back in a smart way.
Mm-hmm.
He exposed it. He spoke about it. He brought truth to it. And today, Christians are doing, for the most part, have been doing the opposite. Because of these verses here, when they are faced with adversity, when they're faced with even governments telling them to do something they shouldn't do, think about COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
The pastors, the leaders of these churches, they're teaching their members to be doormats, to be weak,
Right.
to roll over, and because that's what Jesus would do. But they're not teaching them. And the opposite is also not true. We should not lash out.
Right.
We should not fire back.
Not an eye for an eye. We're not to respond
Like Trump
in
didn't
kind.
raise an army.
And justice.
Right.
And again,
Because Trump could have raised an army.
listen,
And
yes.
he didn't do that.
I'm not going to say what I know or how I know, but yes, he could have.
Yeah.
And
he
I'm
could have.
sure that he told people to stand down. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm just going to put that out there. But justice is about restoring shalom. What would that have accomplished? And notice that one of the things he said today is he wants to be a peacemaker. Did you hear him say that during his speech? I was like, Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, whoop, whoop.
Yep.
I was like, he's in it. And, you know, so with all of that being said, I think that we need to realize that to bring justice, to experience justice, to live in justice, in peace, to be a peacemaker, and all these things that we've talked about, it does not mean bowing down and cowering in the face of adversity, in the case of persecution. Like, if you're being persecuted for righteousness, for doing what's right, or you're being persecuted because you're a Christian, do you think Jesus wants you to sit down and be quiet?
No.
That's not what he wants. So that's why this passage was, I never really went into it because it just didn't make sense to me. It was like, there's no way we're supposed to be a doormat. And hearing this teaching, understanding what the Greek said, the culture of the time, those examples, the examples that we just went through, so the slapping, the going the extra mile, that stuff, kind of gives credence to the use of that word as a pun.
Yeah.
Because Jesus gave examples. Like he said, do not resist the evil one, right? In our English translation, and then gave those examples. But those examples almost seem like you're not just going to let them do harm. You're going to let them keep harming. And I just don't see that. I don't see that anywhere in scripture. It didn't make sense. So understanding the culture and what it meant and the perspective of insults and shame and all that stuff. So when I look at that, I think practically speaking, these are three very specific examples, right? So if someone punches you on the face, I'm just going to go ahead and say, don't turn the other cheek and let them punch you in the other face.
No, because that's not what it's saying.
That's not the principle. The principle is you need to know who you are, who God thinks you are, who God knows that you are, who God created you to be, and you need to stand for that. And when someone tries to tell you that that's not who you are, you need to stand and say, yes, I am, but not in a violent way, not doing it in the kind that they did to you, not, we have the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So the opposite is true. Don't do what you don't want people doing to you. Don't repay evil for evil. You need to do what's wise. And every situation, I always say this when people ask for counsel, every situation is a situation.
Right. So, like, for example, I had some people a while back and even recently just say a bunch of lies, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to go lie about them.
Not me. I wanted to tell the truth about them. Because
But
the truth
I'm just
would
saying
do
that-
all the damage.
I know the truth would be really bad, but actually the truth is really what we should have done. We should have just told the truth about them and just delivered the boom. But I didn't because I didn't want to hurt them at the time. But I had the ammunition, but I held back because I didn't want to hurt them.
Yeah, but this is okay. So that's a perfect example. Do not repay in kind.
But
So if they're
but hold on, let
going-
me finish this first. If they're going to lie about me, the wrong response would be to go lie about them. If someone lies about you, you don't go start lying about them. If someone is treating you poorly, you don't start treating them poorly.
I'm gonna go a little deeper. In that case, it's not just don't lie about them. You have to go to the heart of the matter, the purpose. What they were trying to do was get people to turn away from you. They were manipulating people into believing something about you. Why? With the intention to get people to turn against you. So repaying in kind is you doing something to get people to turn against them.
Yeah.
It's intense.
And I never did that.
But that's the heart of it. And that's why I
wanted to do that.
Can I say things, bring up the truth publicly that would absolutely shame people? Yes. Can I post things on Facebook like people do to make people look bad? Yes, I could. Do I do it? No. Because I have no desire to turn anyone against anyone. That's not the
shame
point.
Shame for shame, tit for tat.
The point, like, for me is leave me alone. Like, that's all. Like, at this point, I don't even want to be, I'm not even looking to be given back what was lost. I just want to be left in peace. Like, just leave me alone.
That is kind of the right path. But every situation is different. But the point here is that since he's not talking about that from a Western English point of view, it should not be translated the way the Message Bible translated it. That's a bad translation.
Okay. So let me tell you the one part that I actually liked about it. Okay, so it says...
I didn't even find one part.
Here's another old saying that deserves a second look. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Is that going to get us anywhere?
Okay, that's good.
I like that part because it's true.
We did find something.
Is that going to do anything for you?
No, because that's not what this is about.
If you take out my eye, and in retribution, I take out your eye. Now we got two blind people going on. Like, what?
Right, exactly.
Like, what's the point?
There's no point.
What's the point? So I think that's what matters. It's looking back and saying, okay, what does justice really look like in my case? If someone has taken something from me, whether literally, metaphorically, whether physically or mentally, financially, whatever. If someone has taken something from me, what does it look like for me to get back what was lost? What does it look like to have shalom in my life? What do you really want out of it? Like, what do they really take from you? Because let's say someone could take money from you, but what do they really take from you? Did they take your ability to start a new business? Did they take your ability to go to college? Did they take your ability to buy food? What is it that they really took from you? Because the justice is getting that thing that you really wanted. And this is the beauty. Listen, this is the beauty and why I love God so much, because he is our justice and he is faithful and he knows all the things that have been taken from us. And I'm telling you right now that he makes sure that whatever was taken from you is restored. And it may not be like for like. It may not be like you got $20 stolen from you and you're going to get $20 back. But he's going to give you a meal that's worth more than that $20 one day. And that's going to be the repayment. Mm-hmm. And God always gives you more. That's just the way he works. And I
Yeah.
can't explain it. I know this in my life, and this is why I trust him and why my faith is so big, because that's what I've seen him do for me over and over again.
And again, this is about love, and we're not going to go on to 43, but he answers his own question with that. Like, this is about love. Love is the answer. Love is the new rule. Love is the new
Right.
commandment. How does it look in love?
Right.
Right? And there's a lot of options. We have a lot more options under love than we do in retribution or under the law.
Or even under the law. I think this is where, again, wisdom is so necessary. And wisdom is not about knowledge. It's not about knowing the right thing or the wrong thing. It's about being able to look at these situations and say, okay, maybe the Bible doesn't tell me exactly what to do, but here's the principle that Jesus taught me. And what's a creative, non-violent solution that's grounded in love?
Yeah, so if someone in today's world, if someone punches you in the face, the goal ultimately is to convince them and to show them, hey, it's not only is it not good to punch me in the face, but it's actually a bad idea to punch anyone in the face.
Correct.
And to convince them to never want to punch you in the face again.
Mm-hmm.
It's transformative justice that says, not only am I going to make sure you don't punch me in the face anymore, but you're going to not want to punch anyone in the face anymore.
Well, babe, can I tell you something? That is a beautiful transition on how we are going to end today's podcast.
Perfect.
Because I don't know, was it the last one or the one before? I don't know. They all blur together. But last one I ended with a quote from Micah Miller. And now I'm going to end with one from Martin Luther King Jr.,
Perfect.
Who we honor today. And I'm going to read the 10 Commandments that you can read in his book, Why We Can't Wait. And I'm actually going to read the whole book because I've read a bunch of stuff already from it. And I'm like, this sounds really good. So these are the 10 Commandments that he had. And everything that we talked about today is in here. That's what's so incredible. This man understood what justice was. He understood God's love, and it's just beautiful. So, commandment number 1, meditate daily on the teachings and life of Jesus. So not just on the teachings, but also the life. This is important because that's what I do. 2, remember always, I read this earlier, remember always that the nonviolent movement in Birmingham seeks justice and reconciliation, not victory. So we're not looking, like, you know how we say, we're not looking for agreement. We're looking for understanding, right? 3, walk and talk in the manner of love, for God is love. 4, pray daily to be used by God in order that all men be free. 5, sacrifice personal wishes in order that all men might be free. This one's a big one because in essence, he's saying, I know that we're not free right now, but we're going to sacrifice so that everyone can be free.
Yeah, because revenge would only hurt everyone.
Yes, this is not about me seeking freedom.
Yeah.
This is about all of us having freedom, right? So just some things that stood out to me because as I go into this year and I'm going to try to change laws and stuff, and although I had to suffer, now I see like, okay, I had to suffer, but that's okay because now I'm going to bring justice to people. I didn't have that justice, but I'm going to be able to bring that justice to
other people
everyone.
can't bring the same suffering onto others.
Number 6, observe with both friend and foe the ordinary course of courtesy. 7, seek to perform regular service for others and for the world. 8, refrain from violence of fist, tongue, or heart. That's so good. Because here he's talking about all kinds of violence.
And today it's thumb too. People type with their thumb.
Keyboard warriors.
Keyboard, yeah.
9, strive to be in good spiritual and bodily health. And 10, follow the directions of the movement and of the captain of a demonstration. These were someone that if you were going to be part of the movement, you had to sign. And they trained you. And one of the things that they mentioned in the Bible Project that I thought was interesting was, think about, this is something people need to be trained in. It's not necessarily our instinct. We want to make people pay. You told a story to my parents? I think you were saying like people who were slaves and then they were set free and they went to a different land, and then they wound up enslaving the indigenous people there, right? So it's, if you've been oppressed, a lot of times our instinct is to oppress those who oppressed us. But even Martin Luther King Jr. said this all the time. This is not about oppressing the people who oppressed us. This is about freedom for all people. And this goes, like, we're about to go next week. We're going to talk about loving our enemies. This is not about making our enemies pay. This is not about punishment for our enemies. And God knows my heart. I do not want any of my enemies to suffer. What I want is for them to see the truth. What I want is for them to stop attacking me. Because I'm telling you right now, when you attack me, you are attacking God. I say that with the most reverent and humble heart. But it's, you don't understand what you're engaging in when you attack people. And the call is to stop. But if you don't stop, I will stand for justice. I will stand for what's right. I am not going to let you kill me. I am not Jesus. I am not the Savior, nor am I one of the disciples. I am not going to let you kill me. I will fight for my life. Unless Jesus comes down and tells me not to. But as of right now, like, what I see is fight for your life, fight for yourself, fight for your dignity, fight for your honor.
If you allow yourself to be killed, then how many other people will be killed?
And who are you helping?
At some point, you have to stand up against that cycle.
You have to. And this is the thing. I know that some people can't. I know that some people have been so torn down, right? Like, emotionally, mentally, they just can't muster up what they need to stand up. And this is where, to me, I see, like, this is where I come in. I have the personality. I have what it takes. I'm going to stand up for those people.
Yeah.
Because that's what Jesus did. He came for those who were vulnerable, for those who were weak, for those who couldn't do it on their own. But the reality is that you can do it on your own. You do have it in you. God is in you. And Jesus has empowered us to stand up and do what's right. Not just for us, but for everyone. We all have that. But I understand that sometimes circumstances beat you down. Like last year, I was in a really bad place. I was going through chemo, and physically, I was not doing well. Inside of me, I was good. My faith was good. But physically, I was down. So I needed other people to stand up for me, to protect me, to make sure that no one was harming me. Thankfully, I had people to do that for me. So when I want to do that for other people. Mm-hmm. And I just want you to know that God is for you. God created you. You are made in his image and likeness. Do not ever let anyone tell you anything different from that. You may not be reflecting that well. You may not be living the life you think you should be living. That's okay. It doesn't change how God designed you. But if you turn to God, you just turn your heart to him and you ask him to help you live a life of righteousness, live a life where you're right with him and you're right with others. He will help you. Your dignity, your honor, the respect that you need, that you deserve, doesn't change. Other people's opinions do not matter. So stand up for who you are. Always remember Galatians 1:10. What matters is what God has to say about you. Doesn't matter what humans have to say. What matters is what God has to say. And sometimes we know ourselves and then we think God thinks something of us because we know ourselves. But is that really what God has to say about you? There's a difference between who you are and the things that you do. And the things that you do oftentimes are a reflection of who you are. But that could so easily switch, Yeah. And if you make a mistake, it doesn't define you. It doesn't make you who you are. What makes you who you are is who God says. And the goal is for us to walk in that. So if you're not walking in it, just turn there. But if you're someone who finds yourself being victimized by evil, regardless of what that looks like, God is saying, stand up, not in kind. Don't repay evil for evil. Ask him for wisdom, and he's going to show you how to stand up for yourself, how to bring honor to him, to yourself, and to everyone around you. Well, thanks for walking me through that. That's the first time
walking me through that.
I want to refine it a little bit, but I'm going to share the link.
Now I'm going to have to go look at the the episode with the Bible Project.
It's
and I'm going to have
so-
to watch the Chosen episode you talked about.
Do you know how many times I listened to the Bible Project episode? I think 3.5. Because it was such a new concept to me that I was trying to like get it to stick in my brain.
Yeah, there's a few things you brought up that I want to go listen to see if I can understand what was being said there.
Yeah, and I did some research to just, see if there's consensus, and there definitely is consensus, especially around all the things of context that we talked about.
Yeah, because I never watched that, but this is what I'd come up with.
Mm-hmm. It's very similar.
Yeah, it's similar, right? So there must be consensus because I was learning from another theologian. So
yeah, the way
or a group,
the
of
way
them.
they, because it's 3 people in this episode, the way they walk through it and like kind of explain it was just beautifully laid out. But then I had to go back and listen to it because when I'm running, when I listen to it, my brain goes off and then I learn something new. So then my brain, I'm trying to connect. It's like Legos, like everything's connecting. So then I get stuck in a certain area. So then I have to go, let me go back and then build from there. So it's
That's one
just a
thing-
whole different way to look at it.